All right, 6:13 on the clock. I already know the law. We are continuing on this heathen origin story, confusion of faces. Let's clear up the masquerade. Alrighty. So we left off on the Horites, I believe. Let me go back a little bit. Oh, it was the Rephaim. So we were on the valley of the Rephaim. One second, let me find my page. So we have a lot of people that like to talk about grafting in, adding people to the nation. That's something that the Most High said not to do, yet we continue to do it time after time again, continuing to curse our bloodline. So I am here as a judge of Israel to let you all know what it is and what it ain't. So here we are. Um, did I not? Goodness gracious. I hate not having my computers, but it is what it is. We're going to get the information out, whether these demons like it or not. My gosh, where are you? Okay, the Valley of Rephaim. So, Emek Rephaim, Joshua chapter 15, verse 8 and 18, verse 16, is a valley descending southwest from Jerusalem to Nahal Sorek below. It is an ancient route from the coastal plain to the Judean hills, probably named after the legendary race of giants, Emek Rephaim, and the German colony in Jerusalem takes its name from this valley. Now, I'm going to later on um, tell you how these places correspond to locations here in the United States. So, the biblical narrative, when David became king over all Israel, the Philistines, judging that he would now become their uncompromising enemy, made a sudden attack upon Hebron, compelling David to retire from it. He sought refuge in the hold at Adullam, 2 Samuel chapter 5, verses 17 through 22, and the Philistines took up their position in or raided the valley of Rephaim on the west and southwest of Jerusalem. Thus, all communication between Bethlehem and Jerusalem was intercepted. While David and his army were encamped here, there occurred the battle narrated in 2 Samuel chapter 5, 17 through 25, and 1 Chronicles chapter 14, 8 through 12. Having obtained divine direction, David led his army against the Philistines and gained a complete victory over them. The scene of this victory was afterwards called Baal Perazim. A second time, however, the Philistines rallied their forces in this valley, 2 Samuel 5, verse 22, and 1 Chronicles chapter 14, verses 13 through 16. Again, warned by a divine saying about hearing a marching sound in the tops of the baka trees or mulberry trees, most modern versions balsam, David led his army to Gibeon and attacked the Philistines from the south, inflicting on them another severe defeat, and chasing them with great slaughter to Gezer. There David kept in check these enemies of Israel, and in consequence his fame grew. One of the ancient farming complexes excavated in the valley of Rephaim is Ras, an Iron Age terraced farm. The railway, the Tel Aviv-Jerusalem Railway, originally known as the Jaffa-Jerusalem Railway, uses the entire length of the Valley of the Rephaim from Jerusalem to its junction with Nahal Sorek. Okay, so the Nephilim. The Nephilim are mysterious beings or people in the Hebrew Bible who are described as being large and strong. The word Nephilim is loosely translated as giants in most translations of the Hebrew Bible, but left untranslated in others. Some Jewish explanations interpret them as hybrid sons of fallen angels or demigods. The main reference to them is in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. But the passage is ambiguous and the identity of the Nephilim is disputed. According to the book of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 33, a report from 10 of the 12 spies was given of them inhabiting Canaan at the time of the Israelite conquest of Canaan. A similar or identical biblical Hebrew term read as Nephilim by some scholars, or as the word fallen by others, appears in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 32, verse 27, and is also mentioned in the Deuterocanonical books Judith 16 and 6, Sirach 16, verse 7, Baruch 3, verse 26 through 28, and Wisdom chapter 14 and 6. The etymology. The Brown Driver Briggs Lexicon, 1908, gives the meaning of Nephilim as giants and holds that proposed etymologies of the word are all very precarious. Many suggested interpretations are based on the assumption that the word is a derivative of Hebrew verbal root npl or fall. Robert Baker Girdlestone argued in 1871 the word comes from the Hiphil causative stern, implying that the Nephilim are to be perceived as those that cause others to fall down. Ronald Hindle states that it is a passive form, ones who have fallen, grammatically analogous to pakid, one who is appointed, a deputy or overseer, a seer, one who is bound, a prisoner, etc. The majority of ancient biblical translations, including the Septuagint, the Theodotian, Latin Vulgate, Samaritan Targum, Targum Onkelos, and Targum Neophyti, whatever, Interpret the word to mean giants. Symmachus translates it as the violent ones, and Achilles' translation has been interpreted to mean either the fallen ones or the ones falling upon their enemies. In the Hebrew Bible, there are three interconnected passages referring the Nephilim. Two of them come from the Pentateuch. The first occurrence is in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, immediately before the account of Noah's Ark. Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 reads as follows: The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. The same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. Where the Jewish Publication Society translation simply transliterates the Hebrew Nephilim as Nephilim, the King James Version translates the term as giants. The nature of the Nephilim is complicated by the ambiguity of Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, which leaves it unclear whether they are the sons of God or their offspring who are the mighty men of old, men of renown. Richard Hess takes it to mean that the Nephilim are the offspring, as does P.W. Coxon. The second is Numbers chapter 13, verses 32 through 33, where 10 of the 12 spies report that they have seen fearsome giants in Canaan. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Outside the Pentateuch, there is one more passage indirectly referencing Nephilim, and this is Ezekiel chapter 32, verses 17 through 32. Of special significance is Ezekiel 32, verse 27, which contains a phrase of disputed meaning. With the traditional vowels added to the text in the medieval period, the phrase is read Gibborim Nephilim, fallen warriors, or fallen Gibborim, although some scholars read the phrase as Gibborim Nephilim, Nephilim warriors, or warriors Nephilim. According to Ronald S. Hindle, the phrase should be interpreted as warriors, the Nephilim, in a reference to Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. The verse, as understood by Hindle, reads, They lie with the warriors, the Nephilim of old, who descended to Sheol with their weapons of war. They placed their swords beneath their heads and their shields upon their bones. For the terror of the warriors was upon the land of the living. Brian R. Doak, on the other hand, proposes to read the term as the Hebrew verb fallen, Nephilim, not a use of the specific term Nephilim, but still, according to Doak, a clear reference to the Nephilim tradition as found in Genesis. Interpretations. Giants. Most of the contemporary English translations of Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, and Numbers chapter 13 and 33 render the Hebrew Nephilim as giants. This tendency in turn stems from the fact that one of the earliest translations of the Hebrew Bible, the Septuagint, composed in the 3rd or 2nd century BCE, renders the said word as gigantus. The choice made by the Greek translators has been later adopted into the Latin translation, the Vulgate, compiled in the 4th or 5th century CE, which uses the transcription of the Greek term rather than the literal translation of the Hebrew Nephilim. From there, the tradition of the giant progeny of the sons of God and the daughters of men spread to later medieval translations of the Bible. The decision of the Greek translators to render the Hebrew Nephilim as Greek gigantes is a separate matter. The Hebrew Nephilim means literally the fallen ones, and the strict translation into Greek would be peptokos, which in fact appears in the Septuagint of Ezekiel chapter 32, verses 22 through 27. It seems then that the authors of Septuagint wished not only to simply translate the foreign term into Greek, but also to employ a term which would be intelligible and meaningful for their Hellenistic audiences. Given the complex meaning of the Nephilim, which emerged from the three interconnected biblical passages, human divine hybrids in Genesis 6, autochthonous people in Numbers 13, and ancient warriors trapped in the underworld in Ezekiel 32. The Greek translators recognized some similarities. First and foremost, both Nephilim and Gigantes were liminal beings resulting from the union of the opposite orders, and as such retained the unclear status between the human and divine. Similarly dim was their moral designation, and the sources witnessed to both awe and fascination with which these figures must have been looked upon. Secondly, both were presented as impersonating chaotic qualities and posing some serious danger to gods and humans. They appeared either in the prehistoric or early historical context, but in both cases they preceded the ordering of the cosmos. Lastly, both Gigantes and Nephilim were clearly connected with the underworld and were said to have originated from Earth, and they both end up clothed therein. In First Enoch, they were great giants whose height was 300 cubits, a cubit being 18 inches or 46 centimeters. This would make them 450 feet tall or 140 meters tall. The Quran refers to the people of Ad in Quran 26 and 130, whom the prophet Hud declares to be like Jabarim or Gibbarim in Hebrew, probably a reference to the biblical Nephilim. The people of Ad are said to be giants, the tallest among them 100 feet or 30 meters high. However, according to Islamic legend, the Ad were not wiped out by the flood, since some of them had been too tall to be drowned. Instead, God destroyed them after they rejected further warnings. After death, they were banished into the lower layers of hell. Fallen angels. All early sources refer to the sons of heaven as angels. From the 3rd century BCE onwards, references are found in the Enochic literature, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Genesis Apocryphon, the Damascus document 4Q 180, Jubilees, the Testament of Reuben, 2nd Baruch, Josephus, and the Book of Jude. Compare with 2nd Peter chapter 2. For example, 1st Enoch chapter 7 verse 2, and when the angels, the sons of heaven, beheld them, they became enamored of them, saying to each other, come, let us select for ourselves wives from the progeny of men, and let us beget children. Some Christian apologists, such as Tertullian and especially Lactantius, shared this opinion. The earliest statement in a secondary commentary explicitly interpreting this to mean that angelic beings mated with humans can be traced to the rabbinical Targum Suedo Jonathan, and it has since become especially commonplace in modern Christian commentaries. This line of interpretation finds additional support in the text of Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, which juxtaposes the sons of God, male gender and divine nature, with the daughters of men, female gender, human nature. From this parallelism, it could be inferred that the sons of God are understood as some superhuman beings. The New American Bible Commentary draws a parallel to the Epistle of Jude and the statements set forth in Genesis, suggesting that the epistle refers implicitly to the paternity of Nephilim as heavenly beings who came to earth and had sexual intercourse with women. The footnotes of the Jerusalem Bible suggests that the biblical author intended the Nephilim to be an anecdote of a superhuman race. Some Christian commentators have argued against this view, citing Jesus' statement that angels do not marry. Others believe that Jesus was only referring to angels in heaven. Evidence cited in favor of the fallen angels' interpretation includes the fact that the phrase the sons of God or sons of the gods is used twice outside of Genesis chapter 6 in the book of Job, chapter 1, verse 6, and chapter 2, verse 1, where the phrase explicitly references angels. The Septuagint manuscript, Codex Alexandrinus, reading of Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, renders this phrase as the angels of God, while Codex Vaticanus reads sons. Targum Pseudo Jonathan identifies the Nephilim as Shemhaza and the angels in the name list from 1st Enoch. Second Temple Judaism. The story of the Nephilim is further elaborated in the book of Enoch. The Greek, Aramaic, and main Ge'ez manuscripts of First Enoch and Jubilees obtained in the 19th century and held in the British Museum and Vatican Library connect the origin of the Nephilim with the fallen angels, and in particular with the egregary watchers. Samyaza, an angel of high rank, is described as leading a rebel sect of angels in a descent to earth to have sexual intercourse with human females. And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Samjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. In this tradition, the children of the Nephilim are called the Eloid, who are considered a separate race from the Nephilim, but they share the fate of the Nephilim. Some believe the fallen angels who begat the Nephilim were cast into Tartarus, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, Jude chapter 1, verse 6, Greek Enoch chapter 20, verse 2, a place of total darkness. An interpretation is that God granted 10% of the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim to remain after the flood as demons, to try to lead the human race astray until the final judgment. In addition to Enoch, the book of Jubilees, chapter 7, verses 21 through 25, also states that ridding the earth of these Nephilim was one of God's purposes for flooding the earth in Noah's time. These works describe the Nephilim as being evil giants. There are also allusions to these descendants in the Deuterocanonical books of Judith, chapter 16, verse 6, Sirach, chapter 16, verse 7, Baruch, chapter 3, verses 26 through 28, and Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, verse 6, and in the non-Deuterocanonical 3 Maccabees, chapter 2, verse 4. The New Testament epistle of Jude, 14 through 15, cites that 1 Enoch 1 and 9, which many scholars believe is based on Deuteronomy 33 and 2. To most commentators, this confirms that the author of Jude regarded the Enochic interpretations of Genesis 6 as correct. However, others have questioned this. Descendants of Seth and Cain. References to the offspring of Seth rebelling from God and mingling with the daughters of Cain are found from the 2nd century CE onwards in both Christian and Jewish sources. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Augustine of Hippo, Sextus Julius Africanus, and the letters attributed to Saint Clement. It is also the view expressed in the modern canonical Amharic Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Enoch 2, verses 1 through 3, and the offspring of Seth, who were upon the holy mount, saw them and loved them. And they told one another, Come, let us choose for us daughters from Cain's children. Let us bear children for us. Orthodox Judaism has taken a stance against the idea that Genesis chapter 6 refers to angels or that angels could intermarry with men. Shimon bar Yochai pronounced a curse on anyone teaching this idea. Rashi and Nachmanides followed this. Pseudo Philo, Biblical Antiquities 3:1-3, may also imply that the sons of God were human. Consequently, most Jewish commentaries and translations describe the Nephilim as being from the offspring of sons of nobles, rather than from sons of God or sons of angels. This is also the rendering suggested in the Targum Onkelos, Symmachus, and the Samaritan Targum, which read sons of the rulers, where Targum Neophyti reads sons of the judges. Likewise, a long-held view among some Christians is that the sons of God were the formerly righteous descendants of Seth who rebelled, while the daughters of men were the unrighteous descendants of Cain, and the Nephilim the offspring of their union. This view, dating to at least the 1st century CE in Jewish literature as described above, is also found in Christian sources from the 3rd century, if not earlier, with references throughout the Clementine literature, as well as in Sextus Julius Africanus, Ephraim the Syrian, and others. Holders of this view have looked for support in Jesus' statement that in those days before the flood, they, humans, were marrying and given in marriage. Matthew chapter 24:38, emphasis added. Some individuals and groups, including St. Augustine, John Chrysostom, and John Calvin, take the view of Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, that the angels who fathered the Nephilim referred to certain human males from the lineage of Seth who were called sons of God, probably in reference to their prior covenant with Yahweh. Deuteronomy 14:1, 32:5. According to these sources, these men had begun to pursue bodily interests and so took wives of the daughters of men, or those who were descended from Cain, or from any people who did not worship God. So this also is the view of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, supported by their own G's manuscript and Amharic translation of the Haile Selassie Bible, where the books of 1st Enoch and Jubilees, counted as canonical by this church, differ from Western academic editions. The Sons of Seth view is also the view presented in a few extra biblical yet ancient works, including Clementine literature, the 3rd century Cave of Treasures, and the 6th century G's work, The Conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan. In these sources, these offspring of Seth were said to have disobeyed God by breeding with the Cainites and produced wicked children who were all unlike, thus angering God into bringing about the deluge, as in the conflict. Certain wise men of old wrote concerning them, and say in their sacred books that angels came down from heaven and mingled with the daughters of Cain, who bare unto them these giants. But these wise men err in what they say. God forbid such a thing, that angels who are spirits should be found committing sin with human beings. Never, that cannot be. And if such a thing were of the nature of angels or Satans that fell, they would not leave one woman on earth undefiled. But many men say that angels came down from heaven and joined themselves to women and had children by them. This cannot be true, but they were children of Seth, who were of the children of Adam that dwelt on the mountains high up, while they preserved their virginity, their innocence, and their glory like angels, and were then called angels of God. But when they transgressed and mingled with the children of Cain and begat children, ill informed men said that angels had come down from heaven and mingled with the daughters of men, who bear them giants. Arguments from culture and mythology. In Aramaic culture, the term Nephilah refers to the constellation of Orion, and Nephilim to the offspring of Orion in mythology. However, the Brown Driver Briggs lexicon notes this as a dubious etymology and all very precarious. J.C. Greenfield mentions that it has been proposed that the tale of the Nephilim, alluded in Genesis 6, is based on some of the negative aspects of the Apkallu tradition. The Apkallu in Sumerian mythology were seven legendary culture heroes from before the flood, of human descent, but possessing extraordinary wisdom from the gods, and one of the seven Apkallu, Adapa, was therefore called son of Ea, the Babylonian god, despite his human origin. Arabian paganism. Fallen angels were believed by Arab pagans to be sent to earth in form of men. Some of them mated with humans and gave rise to hybrid children. As recorded by Al-Jahiz, a common belief held that Abu Jurham, the ancestor of the Jurham tribe, was actually the son of a disobedient angel and a human woman. Fossil remains. In 1577, a series of large bones discovered near Lucerne were interpreted as the bones of an antediluvian giant about 5.8 meters or 19 feet tall. In 1786, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach found out that these remains belonged to a mammoth. Cotton Mather believed that fossilized leg bones and teeth discovered near Albany, New York in 1705 were the remains of Nephilim who perished in a great flood. Paleontologists have identified these as mastodon remains. In popular culture, the name and idea of Nephilim, like many other religious concepts, is sometimes used in popular culture. Examples include the Gothic rock band Fields of the Nephilim, the Rehnquist Quartet novels by Mick Farren, The Mortal Instruments, The Infernal Devices, The Last Hours, The Dark Artifices, and other books in the Shadowhunter Chronicles series by Cassandra Clare, the Hush series by Becca Fitzpatrick, the book Many Waters by Madeleine L'Engle, and the TV series The X-Files and Supernatural. In the video game series Darksiders, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are said to be Nephilim, wherein the Nephilim were created by the unholy union of angels and demons. Dante and Virgil, the main characters of the game, DMC or Devil May Cry 2013, a reboot of the popular original series Devil May Cry, are also referred to as Nephilim, being the offspring of the demon Sparta and the angel Eva. In the trading card game Magic: The Gathering, The Nephilim are interpreted as old gods from before modern society. In Diablo 3, the Nephilim were the first humans upon Sanctuary, created as a result of the union between angels and demons. In the heist themed first person shooter Payday 2, several paintings, artifacts, and far off visuals reference the Nephilim, and a secret ending to the game brings in alien technology supposedly left by the Nephilim. A creature referred to as Nephilim appears in season 2 of the Japanese animated series Symphogear. Nephilim is a role playing game about powerful elemental entities reincarnating into human beings. Anak. Anak, a homophobe to a word for giant or long neck or necklace, is a figure in the Hebrew Bible. His descendants are mentioned in the narratives concerning the conquest of Canaan by the Israelites. According to the book of Numbers, Anak was a forefather of the Anakim. 10 of the 12 Israelite spies described them as very tall descendants of Anak. Compare Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. The text states that the giant stature of the Anakim was the standard by which other giant races were measured, such as the Rephaites, and that Anak was a son of Arba. Etymology. L. Nesolowski Spano proposed a hypothesis that his name is derived from the Greek wanax, or ruler. In the Bible, the sons of Anak are first mentioned in Numbers 13. They are stated in Numbers 13, verse 33, to be descended from the Nephilim. The Israelite leader Moses sends 12 spies representing the 12 tribes of Israel to scout out the land of Canaan. The spies enter from the Negev desert and journey northward through the Judean hills until they arrive at the brook of Eshcol near Hebron, where reside Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the sons of Anak. After the scouts have explored the entire land, they bring back samples of the fruit of the land, most notably a gigantic cluster of grapes, which requires two men to carry it on a pole between them. The scouts then report to Moses and the congregation that the land indeed is a land flowing with milk and honey, but 10 of the 12 spies discouraged the Israelites from even attempting to possess the land, for they reported that the men were taller and stronger than the Israelites, and moreover, the sons of Anak dwell in the land, and that they felt like grasshoppers in their presence. The Anakites are later mentioned briefly in the books of Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges. Caleb, one of the 12 spies sent by Moses into Canaan, later drove out the descendants of Anak, his three sons, from Hebron, also called Kiriath Arba, in Judges chapter 1, verse 20. Extra biblical mentions. A woman of similar name, Anak bint Adam, appears as the mother of Uj, the Arabic equivalent of Og in Islamic tradition. The Egyptian execration text of the Middle Kingdom, 2055 through 1650 BC, mention a list of political enemies in Canaan, and among this list are a group called the Li Anak, or people of Anak. The three rulers of Li or Lai Anak were Arum, Abayamimu, and Akiram. Robert Graves, considering the relationship between the Anakites and Philistia, Joshua 11 and 21, Jeremiah 47 and 5, identifies the Anakim with Anax, the giant ruler of the Anactorians in Greek mythology. Cultural references. In Herman Melville's 1851 novel Moby Dick, chapter 59, Squid, narrator Ishmael alludes to the great kraken of Bishop Pontoppidan, then concludes the chapter. By some naturalists who have vaguely heard rumors of the mysterious creature here spoken of, it is included among the class of cuttlefish, to which indeed in certain external respects it would seem to belong, but only as the Anak of the tribe. Anakim or Anakim, are mentioned in the Bible as a race of giants descended from Anak. According to the Old Testament, the Anakim lived in the southern part of the land of Canaan, near Hebron. Genesis 23, verse 2, Joshua 15 and 13. Genesis 14, 5 through 6 states that they inhabited the region later known as Edom and Moab in the days of Abraham. The name may come from a Hebrew root meaning necklace or neck chain. Their formidable appearance, as described by the 12 spies sent to search the land, filled the Israelites with terror. The Israelites seem to have identified them with the Nephilim, the giants, Genesis 6:4, Numbers 13 and 33, of the antediluvian age. Joshua finally expelled them from the land, except for some who found a refuge in the Philistine cities of Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Joshua 11 and 22. Thus, the Philistine giants, Goliath, whom David encountered, 2 Samuel 21 and 15 through 22, were descendants of the Anakim. The Septuagint translation of Jeremiah 47, verse 5, refers to the descendants of the Anakim mourning after the destruction of Gaza. The Egyptian execration text of the Middle Kingdom, 2055 through 1650 BC, mention a list of political enemies in Canaan, and among the list are a group called the Li-Anak or Lianak, or people of Anak. The three rulers Lianak were Arum, Abayamimu, and Akarum. Again. Now, the city of Gaza. Gaza, also referred to as Gaza City, is a Palestinian city in the Gaza Strip with a population of 590,481 in 2017, making it the largest city in the state of Palestine. Inhabited since at least the 15th century BCE, Gaza has been dominated by several different peoples and empires throughout its history. The Philistines made it a part of their Pentapolis after the ancient Egyptians had ruled it for nearly 350 years. Under the Roman Empire, Gaza experienced relative peace and its port flourished. In 635 CE, it became the first city in Palestine to be conquered by the Muslim Rashidun army and quickly developed into a center of Islamic law. However, by the time the Crusaders invaded the country starting in 1099, Gaza was in ruins. In later centuries, Gaza experienced several hardships, from Mongol raids to floods and locusts, reducing it to a village by the 16th century when it was incorporated into the Ottoman Empire. During the first half of Ottoman rule, the Ridwan dynasty controlled Gaza, and under them, the city went through an age of great commerce and peace. The municipality of Gaza was established in 1893. Gaza fell to British forces during World War I, becoming a part of mandatory Palestine. As a result of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Egypt administered the newly formed Gaza Strip territory, and several improvements were undertaken in the city. Gaza was captured by Israel in the Six-Day War in 1967, but in 1993 the city was transferred to the newly created Palestinian National Authority. In the months following the 2006 election, an armed conflict broke out between the Palestinian political factions of Fatah and Hamas, resulting in the latter taking power in Gaza. Egypt and Israel consequently imposed a blockade on the Gaza Strip. Israel eased the blockade, allowing consumer goods in June 2010, and Egypt reopened the Rafah border crossing in 2011 to pedestrians. The primary economic activities of Gaza are small-scale industries and agriculture. However, the blockade and recurring conflicts have put the economy under severe pressure. The majority of Gaza's inhabitants are Muslim, although there is also a tiny Christian minority. Gaza has a very young population with roughly 75% under the age of 25. The city is currently administered by a 14-member municipal council. Etymology. The name Gaza is first known from military records of Thutmose III of Egypt in the 15th century BCE. In Semitic languages, the meaning of the city name is fierce or strong. The Hebrew name of the city is Azza. Hmm. The ayin at the beginning of the word represented a voiced velar fricative in biblical Hebrew, but in modern Hebrew it is silent. Although the Z is double in Hebrew, it was transliterated into Greek as a single zeta, and the voiced velar or uvular fricative at the beginning was transliterated with a gamma, thus rendering it Gaza. According to Shahin, the ancient Egyptians called it Gadat or Gazat, the prized city, and the Muslims often referred to it as Gazat Hashim, in honor of Hashim, the great grandfather of Muhammad, who, according to Islamic tradition, is buried in the city. Other proper Arabic transliterations for the Arabic name are Gaza with a H or Gaza with no H. Accordingly, Gaza might be spelled Gaza with two Z's in English. The history of Gaza. Gaza's history of habitation dates back 5,000 years, making it one of the oldest cities in the world, located on the Mediterranean coastal route between North Africa and the Levant. For most of its history, it served as a key entrepot of southern Palestine and an important stopover on the spice trade route traversing the Red Sea. The Bronze Age, Tel es-Sakan and Tel el-Ajul. Settlement in the region of Gaza dates back to the ancient Egyptian fortress built in Canaanite territory at Tel es-Sakan, to the south of present-day Gaza. The site went into decline throughout the early Bronze Age, too, as its trade with Egypt sharply decreased. Another urban center known as Tel el Ajul began to grow along the Wadi Gaza riverbed. During the Middle Bronze Age, a revived Tel es Sakan became the southernmost locality in Palestine, serving as a fort. In 1650 BCE, when the Canaanite Hyksos occupied Egypt, a second city developed on the ruins of the first Tel as Sakan. However, it was abandoned by the 14th century BCE at the end of the Bronze Age. Gaza, during the reign of Thutmose III, 1479 through 1425 BCE, the city became a stop on the Syrian Egyptian caravan route and was mentioned in the 14th century Amarna letters as Azati. Gaza later served as Egypt's administrative capital in Canaan. Gaza remained under Egyptian control for 350 years until it was conquered by the Philistines in the 12th century BCE. Iron Age and the Hebrew Bible. In the 12th century BCE, Gaza became part of the Philistine Pentapolis. According to the Hebrew Bible's book of Judges, Gaza was the place where Samson was imprisoned by the Philistines and met his death. Judges chapter 16, verse 21. Israelite to Persian periods. After being ruled by the Israelites, Assyrians, and then the Egyptians, Gaza achieved relative independence and prosperity under the Persian Empire. Hellenistic period. Alexander the Great besieged Gaza, the last city to resist his conquest on his path to Egypt, for 5 months before finally capturing it in 332 BCE. The inhabitants were either killed or taken captive. Alexander brought in local Bedouins to populate Gaza and organize the city into a polis or city state. In Seleucid times, Seleucus I Nicator, or one of his successors, renamed Gaza into Seleucia to control the surrounding area against the Ptolemies. Greek culture consequently took root and Gaza earned a reputation as a flourishing center of Hellenistic learning and philosophy. During the Third War of the Diadochi, Ptolemy I Soter defeated Demetrius I of Macedon in a battle near Gaza in 312 BCE. In 277 BCE, following Ptolemy II's successful campaign against the Nabateans, the Ptolemaic fortress of Gaza took control of the spice trade with Gera and southern Arabia. Gaza experienced another siege in 96 BCE by the Hasmonean king Alexander Jannaeus, who utterly overthrew the city, killing 500 senators who had fled into the temple of Apollo for safety. Roman period. Josephus notes that Gaza was resettled under the rule of Antipater, who cultivated friendly relations with Gazans, as, as, as Galanites and neighboring cities after being appointed governor of Idumea by Jannaeus. Rebuilt after it was incorporated into the Roman Empire in 63 BCE under the command of Pompey Magnus, Gaza then became a part of the Roman province of Judea. It was targeted by Jewish forces during their rebellion against Roman rule in 66 and was partially destroyed. It nevertheless remained an important city, even more so after the destruction of Jerusalem. Throughout the Roman period, Gaza was a prosperous city and received grants and attention from several emperors. A 500-member Senate governed Gaza, and a diverse variety of Greeks, Romans, Phoenicians, Jews, Egyptians, Persians, and Bedouin populated the city. Gaza's mint issued coins adorned with the busts of gods and emperors. During his visit in 130 CE, Emperor Hadrian personally inaugurated wrestling, boxing, and oratorical competitions in Gaza's new stadium, which became known from Alexandria to Damascus. The city was adorned with many pagan temples, the main cult being that of Mars. Other temples were dedicated to Zeus, Helios, Aphrodite, Apollo, Athena, and the local Tyche. Christianity began to spread throughout Gaza in 250 CE, including in the port of Marmah. The Byzantine period. Following the division of the Roman Empire in the 3rd century CE, Gaza remained under control of the Eastern Roman Empire that in turn became the Byzantine Empire. The city prospered and was an important center for the southern Palestine. A Christian bishopric was established at Gaza. Conversion to Christianity in Gaza was accelerated under Saint Porphyrius between 396 and 420. In 402, Theodosius II ordered all 8 of the city's pagan temples destroyed, and 4 years later, Empress Alia Eudocia commissioned the construction of a church atop the ruins of the Temple of Mars. It was during this era that the Christian philosopher Ananias of Gaza called Gaza his hometown, the Athens of Asia. A large synagogue existed in Gaza in the 6th century, according to excavations. Early Islamic period. In circa 638, Gaza was captured by Arab Muslim forces under Amir ibn Alas. In the years following the Battle of Ajnad, Ash, Aden between the Byzantine Empire and the Rashidun Caliphate in central Palestine. It was captured by Amir's forces about 3 years later, believed to be the site where Muhammad's great grandfather Hashim ibn Abed Manaf was buried. Gaza was not destroyed, and its inhabitants were not attacked by Amir's army despite the city's stiff and lengthy resistance, though its Byzantine garrison was massacred. The arrival of the Muslim Arabs brought significant changes to Gaza. At first, some of its churches were transformed into mosques, including the present Great Mosque of Gaza, the oldest in the city, which was later rebuilt by Sultan Baybars, who endowed it with a huge manuscript library containing over 20,000 manuscripts in the 13th century. A large segment of the population swiftly adopted Islam, and Arabic became the official language. In 767, Muhammad ibn Idris ash-Shafi'i was born in Gaza and lived his early childhood there. He founded the Shafi'i religious code and one of the four major Sunni Muslim schools of law, or fiqh. Security, which was well maintained during early Muslim rule, was the key to Gaza's prosperity. Although alcohol was banned in Islam, the Jewish and Christian communities were allowed to maintain wine production, and grapes, a major cash crop of the city, were exported mainly to Egypt. Because it bordered the desert, Gaza was vulnerable to warring nomadic groups. In 796, it was destroyed during a civil war between the Arab tribes of the area. However, by the 10th century, the city had been rebuilt by the Abbasids. During Abbasid rule, the Jerusalemite geographer al-Muqaddasi described Gaza as a large town lying on the high road to Egypt on the border of the desert. In 978, the Fatimids established an agreement with Alptekin, the Turk ruler of Damascus, whereby the Fatimids would control Gaza and the land south of it, including Egypt, while Abtakan controlled the region north of the city. Crusader and Ayyubid periods. The Crusaders conquered Gaza in 1100, and King Baldwin III built a castle in the city for the Knights Templar in 1149. He also had the great mosque converted back into a church, the Cathedral of St. John. In 1154, Arab traveler al-Idrisi wrote that Gaza is today very populous and in the hands of the Crusaders. In 1187, the Ayyubids, led by Sultan Saladin, captured Gaza and in 1191 destroyed the city's fortifications. Richard the Lionheart apparently refortified the city in 1192, but the walls were dismantled again as a result of the Treaty of Ramla, agreed upon months later in 1193. Ayyubid rule ended in 1260 after the Mongols under Hulagu Khan completely destroyed Gaza, which became his southernmost conquest. The Mamluk period. Following Gaza's destruction by the Mongols, Muslim slave traders based in Egypt, known as the Mamluks, began to administer the area. In 1277, the Mamluks made Gaza the capital of a province that bore its name, Mamlukat Gaza, governorship of Gaza. This district extended along the coastal plain of Palestine from Rafah in the south to just north of Caesarea, and to the east as far as the Cimmerian highlands and the Hebron hills. Other major towns in the province included Kakun, Lud, and Ramla. Gaza, which entered a period of tranquility under the Mamluks, was used by them as an outpost in their offenses against the Crusaders, which ended in 1290. In 1294, an earthquake devastated Gaza, and 5 years later, the Mongols again destroyed all that had been restored by the Mamluks. Syrian geographer al-Dimashqi described Gaza in 1300 as a city so rich in trees it looks like a cloth of brocade spread out upon the land. Under the governorship of Emir Sanjar al-Jali, Gaza was transformed into a flourishing city, and much of the Mamluk era architecture dates back to his reign between 1311 through 1320 and again in 1342. In 1348, the bubonic plague spread to the city, killing the majority of its inhabitants, and in 1352, Gaza suffered from a destructive flood, which was rare in that arid part of Palestine. However, when Arab traveler and writer Ibn Battuta visited the city in 1355, he noted that it was large and populous and has many mosques. The Mamluks contributed to Gazan architecture by building mosques, Islamic colleges, hospitals, caravansaries, and public baths. The Mamluks allowed Jews to return to the city after being expelled by the Crusaders, and the Jewish community prospered during Mamluk rule. Towards the end of the Mamluk period, the Jewish community in Gaza was the third largest in Palestine after the communities in Safad and Jerusalem. In 1481, an Italian Jewish traveler, Meshulam of Volterra, wrote of Gaza: "It is a fine and renowned place, and its fruits are very renowned and good. Bread and good wine is to be found there, but only Jews make wine. Gaza has a circumference of 4 miles and no walls. It is about 6 miles from the sea, and situated in a valley and on a hill. It has a population as numerous as the sands of the sea, and there are about 50 or 60 Jewish householders, artisans. They have a small but pretty synagogue, and vineyards are fields and houses. They had already begun to make the new wine. The Jews live at the top of the hill. May God exalt them. There are also 4 Samaritan householders who live on the hillside." Ottoman period. In 1516, Gaza, at the time a small town with an inactive port, ruined buildings, and reduced trade, was incorporated into the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman army quickly and efficiently crushed a small scale uprising, and the local population generally welcomed them as fellow Sunni Muslims. The city was then made the capital of Gaza Sanjak, part of the larger province of Damascus. The Ridwan family, named after Governor Ridwan Pasha, was the first dynasty to govern Gaza and would continue to rule the city for over a century. Under Ahmad ibn Ridwan, the city became a cultural and religious center as a result of the partnership between the governor and prominent Islamic jurist Hayar al-Din al-Ramli, who was based in the nearby town of al-Ramla. During the rule of Hussein Pasha, strife between the settled population and the nearby Bedouin tribes was dramatically reduced, allowing Gaza to peacefully prosper. The Ridwan period is described as a golden age for Gaza, a time when it served as the virtual capital of Palestine. The Great Mosque was restored and 6 other mosques constructed, while Turkish baths and market stalls proliferated. After the death of Musa Pasha, Hussein's successor, Ottoman officials were appointed to govern in place of the Ridwans. The Ridwan period was Gaza's last golden age during Ottoman rule. After the family was removed from office, the city gradually declined. Starting in the early 19th century, Gaza was culturally dominated by neighboring Egypt. Muhammad Ali of Egypt conquered Gaza in 1832. American scholar Edward Robinson visited the city in 1838, describing it as a thickly populated town larger than Jerusalem, with its old city lying upon a hilltop, while its suburbs laid on the nearby plain. The city benefited from trade and commerce because of its strategic position on the caravan route between Egypt and northern Syria, as well as from producing soap and cotton for trade with the government. Local Arab tribes and Bedouin of Wadi Araba and Ma'an. The bazaars of Gaza were well supplied and were noted by Robinson as far better than those of Jerusalem. Robinson noted that virtually all of Gaza's vestiges of ancient history and antiquity had disappeared due to constant conflict and occupation. By the mid 19th century, Gaza's port was eclipsed by the ports of Jaffa and Haifa, but it retained its fishing fleet. The bubonic plague struck Gaza again in 1839, and the city, lacking political and economic stability, went into a state of stagnation. In 1840, Egyptian and Ottoman troops battled outside of Gaza. The Ottomans won control of the territory, effectively ending Egyptian rule over Palestine. However, the battles brought about more death and destruction in Gaza, whilst the city was still recovering from the effects of the plague. First World War and British Mandate. While leading the Allied forces during World War I, the British won control of the city during Third Battle of Gaza in 1917. After the war, Gaza was included in Mandatory Palestine. In the 1930s and 1940s, Gaza underwent major expansion. New neighborhoods were built along the coast and the southern and eastern plains. International organizations and missionary groups funded most of this construction. Egyptian and Israeli rule. In 1947, United Nations partition plan, Gaza was assigned to be part of an Arab state in Palestine, but was occupied by Egypt following the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Gaza's growing population was augmented by an influx of refugees fleeing or expelled from nearby cities, towns, and villages that were captured by Israel. In 1957, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser made a number of reforms in Gaza, which included expanding educational opportunities and the civil services, providing housing, and establishing local security forces. Gaza was occupied by Israel during the 1967 Six-Day War following the defeat of the Egyptian army. Frequent conflicts have erupted between Palestinians and the Israeli authorities in the city since the 1970s. The tensions led to the first Intifada in 1987. Gaza was a center of confrontation during this uprising, and economic conditions in the city worsened. Palestinian control. In September 1993, the leaders of Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, signed the Oslo Accords. The agreement called for Palestinian administration of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank town of Jericho, which was implemented in May 1994. Israeli forces withdrew from Gaza, leaving a new Palestinian National Authority, or PNA, to administer and police the city. The PNA, or PNA, led by Yasser Arafat, chose Gaza as its first provincial headquarters. The newly established Palestinian National Council held its inaugural session in Gaza in March 1996. In 2005, Israel withdrew its troops from the Gaza Strip and removed the thousands of Israelis who had settled in the territory. See Israel's unilateral disengagement plan of 2004. Since the Israeli withdrawal, Hamas has been engaged in a sometimes violent power struggle with its rival Palestinian organization, Fatah. On January 25, 2006, Hamas won a surprise victory in the elections for the Palestinian Legislative Council, the legislature of the Palestinian National Authority. In 2007, Hamas overthrew Fatah forces in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas members were dismissed from the PNA government in the West Bank in response. Currently, Hamas, recognized as a terror organization by most Western countries, has de facto control of the city and strip. In March 2008, a coalition of human rights groups charged that the Israeli blockade of the city had caused the humanitarian situation in Gaza to have reached its worst point since Israel occupied the territory in the 1967 Six Day War, and that Israeli airstrikes targeting militants in the densely populated areas have often killed bystanders as well. In 2008, Israel commenced an assault against Gaza. Israel stated the strikes were in response to repetitive rocket and mortar attacks from the Gaza Strip into Israel since 2005, while the Palestinians stated that they were responding to Israel's military incursions and blockade of the Gaza Strip. In January 2009, at least 1,300 Palestinians were killed in the conflict. In November 2012, after a week of conflict between Israel and Palestinian militant groups, a ceasefire brokered by Egypt was announced on November 21st. In the 2014 Israel Gaza conflict, 2,205 Palestinians, including at least 1,483 civilians and 71 Israelis, including 66 soldiers and one foreign national in Israel, were killed, according to OCHA. According to an analysis by the New York Times, men ages 20 through 29 who are most likely to be militants are most overrepresented in the death toll. During the 2021 Israel Palestine crisis, the 13-story Hanadai Tower, which contained a political office of Hamas, was destroyed by an Israeli airstrike. Geography. Central Gaza is situated on a low-lying and round hill with an elevation of 14 meters or 46 feet above sea level. Much of the modern city is built along the plain below the hill, especially to the northeast, the north and east, forming Gaza's suburbs. The beach and the port of Gaza are located 3 kilometers or 1.9 miles west of the city's nucleus, and the space in between is entirely built up of low-lying hills. The municipal jurisdiction of the city today constitutes about 45 square kilometers or 17 square miles. Gaza is 78 kilometers or 48 miles southwest of Jerusalem, 71 kilometers or 44 miles south of Tel Aviv, and 30 kilometers or 19 miles north of Rafah. Surrounding localities include Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, and Jabalia to the north, and the village of Abu Madin, the refugee camp of Barej, and the city of Deir al-Bala to the south. The population of Gaza depends on groundwater as the only source for drinking, agricultural use, and domestic supply. The nearest stream is Wadi Gaza to the south, sourced by Abu Medin along the coastline. It bears a small amount of water during the winter and virtually no water during the summer. Most of its water supply is diverted into Israel. The Gaza aquifer along the coast is the main aquifer in the Gaza Strip, and it consists mostly of Pleistocene sandstones. Like most of the Gaza Strip, Gaza is covered by quaternary soil. Clay minerals in the soil absorb many organic and inorganic chemicals, which has partially alleviated the extent of groundwater contamination. A prominent hill southeast of Gaza, known as Tel al-Mantar, has an elevation of 270 feet or 82 meters above sea level. For centuries, it has been claimed as the place to which Samson brought the city gates of the Philistines. The hill is crowned by a Muslim shrine, Maqam, dedicated to Ali al-Mantar, Ali of the Watchtower. There are old Muslim graves around the surrounding trees, and the lintel on the doorway of the Maqam has two medieval Arabic scriptures. The old city forms the main part of Gaza's nucleus. It is roughly divided into two quarters. the northern Daraj quarter, also known as the Muslim quarter, and the southern Zaytun quarter, which contain the Jewish and Christian quarters. Most structures date from the Mamluk and Ottoman eras, and some were built on top of earlier structures. The ancient part of the old city is about 1.6 square kilometers or 0.62 square miles. There were 7 historic gates to the old city: Bab Ascalon, Gate of Ashkelon; Bab al Darum, Gate of Deir al Bala; Bab al Bar, Gate of the Sea; Bab Marnas, Gate of Marnas; Bab al Baladiah, Gate of the town; Bab al Khalil, Gate of Hebron; and Bab al Muntar, Gate of Tel al Muntar. Some of the older buildings in Gaza's Old City use the oblong style of decoration, which features alternating layers of red and white masonry prevalent in the Mamluk era. Daraj contains the gold Caesarea market as well as the Great Mosque of Gaza, the oldest mosque in Gaza, and the Syed al Hashim Mosque. In Zaytun lies the Saint Porphyrius Church, the Khatib al-Walaya Mosque, and Hammam as Samara, the Samaritan's bathhouse. Gaza is composed of 13 districts, or hay, outside of the old city. The first extension of Gaza beyond its city center was the district of Shuja'iyya, built on a hill just east and southeast of the old city during the Ayyubid period. In the northeast is the Mamluk era district of Tufa, which is roughly divided into eastern and western halves and was originally located within the old city's walls. During the 1930s and 1940s, a new residential district, Rimmel or Rimmel, currently divided into the districts of Northern Rimmel and Southern Rimmel, was constructed on the sand dunes west of the city center, and the district of Zaytun was built along Gaza's southern and southwestern borders, while the Judaid or the New and the Turukmen neighborhoods of Shuja'iyya expanded into separate districts in the northeast and southeast, respectively. Judaid, also known Shujaiyat al-Akrad, was named after the Kurdish military units who settled there during the Mamluk era, while Turukmen was named after the Turkmen military units who settled there. The areas between Rimmel and the Old City became the districts of Sabra and Daraj. In the northwest is the district of Nasir, built in the early 1950s and named in honor of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. The district of Sheikh Radwan, developed in the 1970s, is 3 kilometers or 1.9 miles to the north of the Old City and is named after Sheikh Radwan, the tomb of whom is located within the district. Gaza has absorbed the village of Al Quba near the border with Israel, as well as the Palestinian refugee camp of Al Shati along the coast, although the latter is not under the city's municipal jurisdiction. In the late 1990s, the PNA built the more affluent neighborhood of Tel Al Hawa along the southern edge of Rimmel. Along the southern coast of the city is the neighborhood of Sheikh Ijlin. Gaza has a hot semi-arid climate with Mediterranean characteristics, featuring mild rainy winters and dry hot summers. Spring arrives around March or April, and the hottest month is August, with the average high being 31.7 degrees Celsius or 89.1 degrees Fahrenheit. The coolest month is January, with temperatures usually peaking at 18.3 degrees Celsius or 64.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Rain is scarce and falls almost exclusively between November and March, with annual rainfall totaling approximately 395 millimeters or 15.6 inches. The population of Gaza is overwhelmingly composed of Muslims who mostly follow Sunni Islam. During the Fatimid period, Shia Islam was dominant in Gaza, but after Saladin conquered the city in 1187, he promoted a strictly Sunni religious and educational policy, which at the time was instrumental in uniting his Arab and Turkish soldiers. Gaza is home to a small Palestinian Christian minority of about 3,500 people. The majority live in the Zaytun quarter of the Old City and belong to the Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Baptist denominations. In 1906, there were about 750 Christians, of which 700 were Orthodox and 50 were Roman Catholic. Gaza's Jewish community was roughly 3,000 years old, and in 1481 there were 60 Jewish households. Most of them fled from Gaza after the 1929 Palestine riots, when they consisted of 50 families. In Sami Hadawi's land and population survey, Gaza had a population of 34,250, including 80 Jews in 1945. Most of them left the city after the 1948 war due to mutual distrust between them and the Arab majority. Today, there are no Jews living in Gaza. The economy. The major agricultural products are strawberries, citrus, dates, olives, flowers, and various vegetables. Pollution and high demand for water have reduced the productive capacity of farms in the Gaza Strip. Small scale industries include the production of plastics, construction materials, textiles, furniture, pottery, tiles, copperware, and carpets. Since the Oslo Accords, thousands of residents have been employed in government ministries and security services, UNRWA, and international organizations. Minor industries include textiles and food processing. A variety of wares are sold in Gaza street bazaars, including carpets, pottery, wicker furniture, and cotton clothing. The upscale Gaza Mall opened in July 2010. A report by Human Rights and Development Groups published in 2008 stated that Gaza had suffered a long-term pattern of economic stagnation and dire development indicators, the severity which was increased exponentially by the Israeli and Egyptian blockade. The report cited a number of economic indicators to illustrate the point. In 2008, 95% of Gaza's industrial operations were suspended due to lack of access inputs for production and export problems. In 2009, unemployment in Gaza was close to 40%. The private sector, which generates 53% of all jobs in Gaza, was devastated and businesses went bankrupt. In 2005, June, 3,900 factories in Gaza employed 35,000 people. By December 2007, only 1,700 were still employed. The construction industry was paralyzed with tens of thousands of laborers out of work. The agricultural sector was hard hit, affecting nearly 40,000 workers dependent on cash crops. Gaza's food prices rose during the blockade, with wheat flour going up 34%, rice up 21%, and baby powder up 30%. In 2007, households spent an average of 62% of their total income on food compared to 37% in 2004. In less than a decade, the number of families depending on UNRWA food aid increased tenfold. In 2008, 80% of the population relied on humanitarian aid in 2008 compared to 63% in 2006. According to a report by Oxfam in 2009, Gaza suffered from a serious shortage of housing, educational facilities, health facilities, and infrastructure, along with an inadequate sewage system that contributed to hygiene and public health problems. Following a significant easing of the closure policy in 2010, the economy of Gaza began to see a substantial recovery from anemic levels during the height of the blockade. The economy of Gaza grew by 8% in the first 11 months of 2010. Economic activity is largely supported by foreign aid donations. There are a number of hotels in Gaza, including the Palestine Grand Palace, Adam, Al Amal, Al Quds, Cliff, Al Dira, and Mama House. All except the Palestine Hotel are located along in the coastal Remel district. The United Nations, or UN, has a beach club on the same street. Gaza is not a frequent destination for tourists, and most foreigners who stay in hotels are journalists, aid workers, UN, and Red Cross personnel. Upmarket hotels include the Al Quds and the Al Dira Hotel. Cultural centers and museums. The Rashad Shawa Cultural Center, located in Rimmel, was completed in 1988 and named after its founder, former Mayor Rashad Al Shawa. A two-story building with a triangular plan, the Cultural Center performs three main functions: a meeting place for large gatherings during annual festivals, a place to stage exhibitions, and a library. The French Cultural Center is a symbol of French partnership and cooperation in Gaza. It holds art exhibits, concerts, film screenings, and other activities. Whenever possible, French artists are invited to display their artwork, and more frequently, Palestinian artists from the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are invited to participate in art competitions. Established in 1998, the Arts and Crafts Village is a children's cultural center with the objectives of promoting comprehensive, regular, and periodic documentation of creative art in all of its forms. It interacted on a large scale with a class of artists from different nationalities and organized around 100 exhibitions for creative art, ceramics, graphics, carvings, and others. Nearly 10,000 children from throughout the Gaza Strip have benefited from the Arts and Crafts Village. The Gaza Theater, financed by contributions from Norway, opened in 2004. The theater does not receive much funding from the PNA, depending mostly on donations from foreign aid agencies. The A.M. Katan Foundation, a Palestinian arts charity, runs several workshops in Gaza to develop young artistic talent and impart drama skills to teachers. The Gaza Theater Festival was inaugurated in 2005. The Gaza Museum of Archaeology, founded by Jaudet N. Qadri, opened in the summer of 2008. The museum collection features thousands of items, including a statue of a full-breasted Aphrodite in a diaphanous gown, images of other ancient deities, and oil lamps featuring menorahs. Cuisine. Gaza's cuisine is characterized by its generous use of spices and chilies. Other major flavors and ingredients include dill, chard, garlic, cumin, lentils, chickpeas, pomegranates, sour plums, and tamarind. Many of the traditional dishes rely on clay pot cooking, which preserves the flavor and texture of the vegetables and results in fork tender meat. Traditionally, most Gazan dishes are seasonal and rely on ingredients indigenous to the area and its surrounding villages. Poverty has also played an important role in determining many of the city's simple meatless dishes and stews, such as salik wa adaz, shard, and lentils, and basara, skinless fava beans mashed with dried mulukaya leaves and chilies. Seafood is a key aspect of Gaza life and a local staple. Some well-known seafood dishes include zibdiyat, gambari, literally shrimps in a clay pot, and shata, which are crabs stuffed with red-hot chili pepper dip, then baked in the oven. Fish is either fried or grilled after being stuffed with cilantro, garlic, chilies, and cumin, and marinated with various spices. It is also a key ingredient in sayadiyah, rice cooked with caramelized onions, a generous amount of whole garlic cloves, large chunks of well marinated fried fish, and spices such as turmeric, cinnamon, and cumin. Many of the 1948 era refugees were Fahalan or peasants who ate seasonal foods. Sumagaya, popular in Gaza not just on Ramadan but all year round, is a mixture of sumac, tahina, and water combined with charred chunks of beef and chickpeas. The dish is topped with crushed dill seeds, chilies, and fried garlic and served in bowls. Maftul is a wheat-based dish flavored with dried sour plums that is served like couscous or shaped into little balls and steamed over stew or soup. Most Gaza restaurants are located in the Rimmel district. Al Andalus, which specializes in fish and seafood, is popular with tourists, as are Al Samak and the upscale Roots Club. At Faluna is a stylish restaurant near Gaza Port run and staffed by deaf people with the goal of building a society that is more accepting of people with disabilities. Throughout the old city, there are street stalls that sell cooked beans, hummus, roasted sweet potatoes, falafel, and kebabs. Coffee houses or kahwa served Arabic coffee and tea. Gaza's well-known sweet shops, Sakala and Arafat, sell common Arab sweet products and are located off Weda Street. Alcohol is a rarity found only in the United Nations Beach Club. Costumes and embroidery. Gauze is reputed to have originated in Gaza. Cloth for the Gaza Thab was often woven at nearby Majdal or Ascalon. Black or blue cottons or striped pink and green fabric that had been made in Majdal continued to be woven throughout the Gaza Strip by refugees from the coastal plain villages until the 1960s. Thabs here had narrow, tight, straight sleeves. Embroidery was much less dense than the applied in Hebron. The most popular motifs included scissors, mukas, combs, mushut, and triangles, hijab, often arranged in clusters of fives, sevens, and threes, as the use of odd numbers is considered in Arab folklore to be effective against the evil eye. Circa 1990, Hamas and other Islamic movements sought to increase the use of the hijab or headscarf among Gazan women, especially urban and educated women, and the hijab styles since introduced have varied according to class and group identity. Sports. The Palestine Stadium. The Palestinian National Stadium is located in Gaza and has a capacity for 10,000 people. Gaza has several local football teams that participate in the Gaza Strip League. They include Kidmat al Shatia or al Shati Camp, Ittihad al Shujaiya Neighborhood, Gaza Sports Club, and Al Zaytun or the Zaytun Neighborhood. Governance. Today, Gaza serves as the administrative capital of the Gaza Governorate. It contains the Palestinian Legislative Council building. The first municipal council of Gaza was formed in 1893 under the chairmanship of Ali Khalil Shawa. Modern mayorship, however, began in 1906 with his son Syed al Shawa, who was appointed mayor by the Ottoman authorities. Al Shawa oversaw the construction of Gaza's first hospital, several new mosques and schools, the restoration of the Great Mosque, and the introduction of the modern plow to the city. In 1922, British colonial secretary Winston Churchill requested that Gaza develop its own constitution under mandatory Palestine. However, it was rejected by the Palestinians. On July 24, 1994, the PNA proclaimed Gaza the first city council in the Palestinian territories. The 2005 Palestinian municipal elections were not held in Gaza nor in Khan Yunis or Rafah. Instead, Fatah party officials selected the smaller cities, towns, and villages to hold elections, assuming they would fare better in less urban areas. The rival Hamas party, however, won the majority of seats in 7 of the 10 municipalities selected for the first round, with voter turnout being around 80%. 2007 saw violent clashes between the two parties that left over 100 dead, ultimately resulting in Hamas taking over the city. Normally, Palestinian municipalities with populations over 20,000 and that serve as administrative centers have municipal councils consisting of 15 members, including the mayor. The current Municipal Council of Gaza, however, consists of 14 members, including the mayor, Nizar Hijazi. Education. According to the PCBS, in 1997, approximately over 90% of Gaza's population over the age of 10 was literate. Of the city's population, 140,848 were enrolled in schools, 39.8% in elementary school, 33.8% in secondary school, and 26.4% in high school. About 11,134 people received bachelor diplomas or higher diplomas. In 2006, there were 210 schools in Gaza. 151 were run by the Education Ministry of the Palestinian National Authority. 46 were run by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and 13 were private schools. A total of 154,251 students were enrolled, and 5,877 teachers were employed. The currently downtrodden economy has affected education in the Gaza Strip severely. In 2007, a UNRWA survey in the Gaza Strip revealed that there was a nearly 80,000 failure rate in schools grades 4 to 9, with up to 90% failure rates in mathematics. In January 2008, the United Nations Children's Fund reported that schools in Gaza had been canceling classes that were high on energy consumption, such as information technology, science labs, and extracurricular activities. Gaza has many universities. The four main universities in the city are Al Azhar University in Gaza, Al Quds Open University, Al Aqsa University, and the Islamic University of Gaza. The Islamic University, consisting of 10 facilities, was founded by a group of businessmen in 1978, making it the first university in Gaza. It had an enrollment of 20,639 students. Al Azhar is generally secular and was founded in 1992. Al Aqsa University was established in 1991. Al Quds Open University, established in Gaza Educational Region campus in 1992 in a rented building in the center of the city, originally with 730 students. Because of the rapid increase of the number of students, it constructed the first university-owned building in the Nasser district. In 2006 and 2007, it had an enrollment of 3,778 students. The Public Library of Gaza is located off Weda Street and has a collection of nearly 10,000 books in Arabic, English, and French. A total area of about 1,410 square meters or 15,200 square feet. The building consists of 2 floors and a basement. The library was opened in 1999 after cooperation dating from 1996 by Gaza under Mayor Ayoun Shawa, the municipality of Dunkerque, and the World Bank. The library's primary objectives are to provide sources of information that meet the needs of beneficiaries, provide necessary facilities for access to available information sources, and organizing various cultural programs such as cultural events, seminars, lectures, film presentations, videos, art, and book exhibitions. Landmarks in Gaza include the Great Mosque in the Old City. Originally a pagan temple, it was consecrated a Greek Orthodox church by the Byzantines, then a mosque in the 8th century by the Arabs. The Crusaders transformed it into a church, but it was reestablished as a mosque soon after Gaza's reconquest by the Muslims. It is the oldest and largest in the Gaza Strip. Other mosques in the Old City include the Mamluk era Sayyid Hashim Mosque, that believed to house the tomb of Hashim ibn Abd al-Manaf in its dome. There is also the nearby Kateb al-Walaya Mosque that dates back to 1334. In Shujaiya is the Ibn Uthman Mosque, which was built by Nablus native Ahmad ibn Uthman in 1402, and the Mankama Mosque, built by Mamluk Majordomo Berdabak al-Ashrafi in 1455. In Tufa is the Ibn Marwan Mosque, which was built in 1324 and houses the tomb of Ali ibn Marwan, a holy man, which goes back to the death cults and the worshiping of the dead. So the Unknown Soldier Square, located in Rimmel, is a monument dedicated to an unknown Palestinian fighter who died in the 1948 war. In 1967, the monument was torn down by Israeli forces and remained a patch of sand until a public garden was built there with funding from Norway. Qasar al-Basha, originally a Mamluk era villa that was used by Napoleon during his brief sojourn in Gaza, is located in the Old City and is today a girls' school. The Commonwealth Gaza War Cemetery, often referred to as the British War Cemetery, contains the graves of fallen Allied soldiers in World War I. It sits 1.5 kilometers or 1 mile northeast of the city center in the Tufa district near Salah al-Din Road. Infrastructure, water supply, and sanitation. According to the 1997 census by the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, 98.1% of Gaza's residents were connected to the public water supply, while the remainder used a private system. About 87.6% were connected to a public sewage system, and 11.8% used a cesspit. Disgusting. The blockade on Gaza severely restricted the city's water supply. The six main wells for drinking water did not function, and roughly 50% of the population had no water on a regular basis. The municipality claimed it was forced to pump water through salty wells because of the unavailability of electricity. About 20 million liters of raw sewage and 40 million liters of partially treated water per day flowed into the Mediterranean Sea. Disgusting. And untreated sewage bred insects and mice. As a water poor country, Gaza is highly dependent on water from Wadi Gaza. The Gaza aquifer is used as Gaza's main resource for obtaining quality water. However, the majority of water from Wadi Gaza is transported to Jerusalem. Power grid. In 2002, Gaza began operating its own power plant, which was built by Enron. However, the power plant was bombed and destroyed by the Israeli Defense Forces in 2006. Prior to the power plant's destruction, Israel provided additional electricity to Gaza through the Israel Electric Corporation. The plant was partially rebuilt by December 2007, and Israeli electricity continues to be sold to Gaza. Solid waste management is one of key compelling issues facing Gazans today. These challenges are attributed to several factors: the lack of investment in environmental systems, less attention was given to environmental projects, and the absence of law enforcement and the tendency towards crisis management. One of the main aspects of this problem is the huge quantities of rubble and debris generated as a result of Israeli bombardments. For instance, the scale of damage resulting from the Operation Protective Edge is unprecedented. All governments in the Gaza Strip witnessed extensive aerial bombardment, naval shelling, and artillery fire, resulting in a considerable amount of rubble. According to recent statistics, more than 2 million tons of debris was generated. Approximately 10,000 houses were leveled to the ground, including two 13-story residential buildings. A tremendous amount of debris remains scattered in Gaza. Serious efforts and a high budget are required to handle this challenge. More importantly, and based on UNEP study after the 2008 war, the debris is highly likely to be contaminated with PHAs and probably with polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, dioxins, and furan compounds. Healthcare. Al Shifa Hospital, or The Cure, was founded in the Rimmel district by the British Mandate government in the 1940s. Housed in an army barracks, it originally provided quarantine and treatment for febrile diseases. When Egypt administered Gaza, this original department was relocated, and Al Shifa became the city's central hospital. When Israel withdrew from Gaza Strip after occupying it in the 1956 Suez Crisis, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser had Al Shifa Hospital expanded and improved. He also ordered the establishment of a second hospital in the Nasser district with the same name. In 1957, the Quarantine and Febrile Disease Hospital was rebuilt and named Nasser Hospital. Today, Al Shifa remains Gaza's largest medical complex. Throughout the late 1950s, a new health administration, Bandar Gaza or Gaza Region, was established and headed by Haidar Abdel Shafi. Bandar Gaza rented several rooms throughout the city to set up government clinics that provided essential curative care. The Ali Arab Hospital, founded in 1907 by the Church Missionary Society, or CMS, was destroyed in World War I. It was rebuilt after the war by the CMS and in 1955 became the Southern Baptist Hospital. In 1982, the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem took leadership and the original name was restored. Al Quds Hospital, located at the Tel Al Hawa neighborhood and managed by the Palestine Red Crescent Society, is the second largest hospital in Gaza. In 2007, hospitals experienced power cuts lasting for 8 to 12 hours daily, and diesel required for power generators was in short supply. According to the World Health Organization, or WHO, the proportion of patients given permits to exit Gaza for medical care decreased from 89.3% in January 2007 to 64.3% in December 2007. In 2010, a team of doctors from Al Dura Hospital in Gaza spent a year of training at the Cystic Fibrosis Clinic at Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. Upon their return to Gaza, a cystic fibrosis center was established at Al Dura, although the most serious cases are referred to Hadassah. We'll get into that later. Transportation. The Rashid Coastal Road runs along Gaza's coastline and connects it with the rest of Gaza Strip's coastline north and south. The main highway of the Gaza Strip, Salah al-Din Road, the modern Via Maris, runs through the middle of Gaza City, connecting it with Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Rafah in the south, and Jabalia and Beit Hanun in the north. The northern crossing of Salah ad-Din Street into Israel is the Erez crossing, and the crossing into Egypt is the Rafah crossing. Omar Mukhtar Street is the main road in the city of Gaza, running north to south, branching off Salah Aden Street, stretching from the Rimmel coastline and the old city where it ends at the gold market. Prior to the blockade of the Gaza Strip, there existed regular lines of collective taxis to Ramallah and Hebron in the West Bank. Except for private cars, Gaza City is served by taxis and buses. The Yasser Arafat International Airport near Rafah opened in 1998, 40 kilometers or 25 miles south of Gaza. Its runways and facilities were damaged by the Israeli Defense Forces in 2001 and 2002, rendering the airport unusable. In August 2010, the tarmac ramp was destroyed by Palestinians seeking stones and recycled building materials. The Ben Gurion International Airport in Israel is located roughly 75 kilometers or 47 miles northeast of the city. Twin towns and sister cities that Gaza is twinned with: Tel Aviv, Israel; Dunkirk, France; Turin, Italy; Tabriz, Iran; Tromsø, Norway; Cascais, Portugal; Barcelona, Spain; and Cáceres, Spain. Now, that is the end of that. And I will go into, in the next session, the Mount Hebron, where the fallen angels or Nephilim are supposed to have came down and mingled with the women. And we will also go into um, airports and landing paths and such, and how they relate to demons and portals and all that good stuff. So, thanks again for listening. It's been a wonderful reading session. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Love you guys. Peace be unto you. Good night.